Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Managing Task Types. Why does my duration and/or work keep changing? You may also notice from time to time that it's your resource assignment that is changing. Perhaps your resource was initially assigned at 100%, and suddenly you make a change to the schedule, and now the same resource is assigned at, I don't know, 253.8%. We're going to talk about some of the reasons why you can run into those issues, and more importantly, what you can do about it. So we'll start with some brief introductions. I'm going to take just maybe 2 minutes, tell you a little bit about who we are as an organization, and tell you a little bit about my background and experience. We'll do an overview of everything we're going to cover, and then we're going to talk about the scheduling formula. What is the formula that's being run behind the scenes? What is the driving force behind how your tasks are being recalculated? We'll talk about task types. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with fixed units, fixed duration, fixed work, and understanding the differences between the three, you'll definitely get a lot out of that because that's going to answer a lot of questions for you. And then finally, we'll talk about the differences between assignment units and peak units. There are some very important changes that happened when Project 2010 was released, actually. I think it was 2010, yeah, when 2010 was released. And the way assignment units are made visible is much different than it was in prior versions. And a lot of people haven't quite caught on to that yet. So I'll make sure and take you through that as well. Now, a little bit about me. I've been working with Microsoft Project and our project server, Project Online, for about 20 years now. I've been working both as a project manager, creating and tracking schedules on a regular daily basis for most of my career. And then I've also been working to help others learn to be better at managing their schedules and creating their schedules, working as a consultant and a contractor in that role as well. So I have a lot of experience with Microsoft Project, and hopefully I can share some things with you today that will make your life a little bit easier as you work with Microsoft projects. So who is PPM Works? As a company, we are a gold partner with Microsoft. We have years and years and years of experience, myself and other consultants all combined. I don't know the exact number if we combined everything together, but we've all been working in this space for quite some time now. And we have a variety of skills. We can do the consulting, we train people, we do Project Online implementations as well as migrations. We also do a lot of SharePoint work. So pretty much anything that comes out of the Office 365 arena, we would be able to help you with. Training we do as part of our projects. We also offer training outside of projects, meaning if your organization needs, just a couple of days of training for Microsoft Project, we can come on site and deliver that for you. We can also provide ongoing support for Project and Project Online, as well as any customized or specialized solutions. All right, so that's who we are and who I am. Let's talk now about our learning objectives. At the end of this session, my goal is that you will understand how the different task types impact the scheduling formula. I want you to be able to make a change to your schedule, make a change to a task, and be able to anticipate correctly what the schedule will do in response to your change. So we're going to talk about how to select the right task type and then understanding the difference between those assignment units and peak units. So first of all, let's start with the frustration because we all have had it. If you have worked with Microsoft Project for any amount of time at all, I am almost certain that you have wanted to throw your computer through a window or bang your head against a wall. Little nuances here and there that we run into that can be frustrating to deal with. The most frustrating thing that I hear from people is the changing of their dates, their durations, or their work hours. And they don't understand why they're changing. And even worse, they have a hard time figuring out how to get them to change back to reflect appropriately what they want to see in the schedule. So we're going to talk about how to address that. When resource assignments are thrown out of whack, we want to make sure that we're using the right task type. Because the task types, the fixed units, fixed duration, and fixed work that I mentioned earlier, those three task types will determine how project recalculates your task based on changes that you're making. So when your schedule seems and feels like it's completely out of control and you're just about ready to lose it, if you can think back to what we're going to talk about today and remember these task types, it will help you gain a lot of insight. More importantly, it will help you gain a lot of control over your schedules. So what is the scheduling formula? The scheduling formula is duration times units equals work. Now, it says peak units in here. That's true. It is the peak units. We're going to talk about the difference between units and peak units in just a little bit. So for now, just trust me. Duration times peak units equals work. All that means is the duration is the number of business days, right? So you have 5 business days. And then the peak units, how many people are working on it? More specifically, how much of an individual's time is applied or assigned to that task. So if I have 2 people and they're both working full-time, so each of them are working 100% on the task, if my duration is 5 days and then my units, my peak units is 2 because I have 2 people, well, 5 times 2 equals 10. Now, in this case, when we say the work is 10, it's 10 person days, which would be the equivalent of 80 hours. I'm just not always so great at math, so I keep work in days to make it easier. So 5 duration days times 2 peak units, 2 people, is going to equal 10 person days of work. Here's what you need to know. This formula will always hold true. There is nothing you can do to break this formula. So if you already have your duration and your work and your resources all set up, if I were to come in and make a change to my units, let's say I want to take one of the resources off. Sally and Bob were working on the task, but now Bob's gone away to work on a new project. So now I have a 5-day duration task with only 1 unit. Something has to give. When I make that change to the people, it's going to recalculate either the duration or the work. My job as the project manager is to manipulate the tool. I hate to use that word because it seems like such a negative word, but that's what we're doing. We're going to manipulate the tool so that when we change the units from 2 people to 1 person, it will recalculate the variable that we want it to recalculate. We cannot change this formula. There will be times where it appears that the formula is not working, and that's where we're going to talk about those peak units, but it is always working and there's no way you can prevent it from calculating that way. So just as a quick reminder, work is the number of person hours a task requires. It can be expressed in hours, it can be expressed in days. We're going to look at work mostly in days. Duration is the total span of working time for a task. These are your business days. So if I say the task is going to take 7 days, it'll start on a Monday, it'll go through Friday, and then it'll go Monday, Tuesday again. It's going to skip those weekends. So it's the number of business days. And then units, this is either the full-time equivalent or the percentage that represents how a resource has been assigned or allocated to that particular task. So work, duration, and units. Now here are the task types that I mentioned earlier. We're going to take just a few seconds and we're going to talk about each of these task types. It's important that you understand what they are and what they do. We'll look at a few examples on the following screens, and then we're going to go into Microsoft Project and I'll show you live in real time how it works and what happens. So think back to our formula. Duration times units equals work. If we were to set the task type to fixed units, all we're doing is we're telling Microsoft Project, you cannot change my units. So if I fix that variable, if I change the duration, the work would be recalculated. If I change the work, the duration would be recalculated. Project will not recalculate any variable that is fixed. Fixed work, it's going to hold those work hours or person days the same. And again, if the task type is fixed work, if I change the duration, it's going to recalculate units. If I change the units, it will recalculate the duration. Now, there is an additional option called effort driven. Keep in mind that effort is the equivalent of work. So with fixed duration and fixed units, you can have a second option called effort driven, which is either turned on or turned off. This one I'm going to show you. It's easier to explain when we actually look through it and do the demonstration. But basically, this one only applies when you're making changes to resources on an existing task. All right, so fixed units means you're holding the units constant. Fixed work, you're holding the work constant. And fixed duration, you're holding the duration constant. Just as a side note here, if you are not already familiar with these task types, then you're probably using the fixed units, because fixed units by default, out of the box by default, is what your task types will be set to. Now, ironically, fixed units is the one I would say you are most likely to not need within your schedule. Fixed units is something you would use probably for a level of effort like project management activities. More often than not, your task type should be set to fixed work or fixed duration. We'll talk about how to choose the right one in just a few minutes. But just to back up a little bit and further explain how the scheduling formula works when it's coupled with that task type. So in this case, we've got duration times units equals work. We're holding our units constant, right? It's fixed units. So if my duration is 2 days and I've got 2 people, that's the equivalent of 4 person days or 4 days of work, right? If I were to change the duration and say, well, I don't have 2 days, we've got to get this done in 1 day, I still have 2 people assigned to it because it's fixed units, it's not going to allow me to recalculate that, or it's not going to allow the tool to recalculate that. And so then it recalculates the work to 2 person days. Now you may be thinking, well, that doesn't make sense. If it's going to take, 4 person days or 32 hours of work, then that's what it's going to take. And if we have to get it done in 1 day, we need to get more people. And that may be the case, and that's all fine and good. Right now, I want you to focus on understanding how this scheduling formula works and how the task types impact it. Once you have a really good grasp of that, then it'll be much easier for you to go into your own schedules and make the changes that you need. So it may be that you wouldn't use fixed units in this particular case. Maybe you would fix the work to hold the work constant. You can always change those task types, which is the beauty of it. In this scenario, we're going to fix the duration. Again, our duration we say is 2 days. We assign 2 people, which gives us 4 person days. If we take 1 person away, just like we did before, we're now down to 1 unit. We have 2-day duration times 1 unit, and so we're back down to 2 person days. Once again, it recalculates the work. Whatever variable is fixed, it's going to be held constant. You're going to change one of the other variables, and then the third variable is the one that will be recalculated. Our last example here is for duration times peak units equals work, and we've got the work fixed. In this case, your duration is set at 2 days, 2 units, 4 person days. I think you guys have that part down by now. And we're going to recalculate the duration. Well, we're going to change the units, and then the tool's going to recalculate the duration. So again, we have 2 people. If we remove 1, now in this case, it's keeping your work constant. It's keeping that work set to 4 person days. And notice that it recalculated the duration to 4 days. So fixed work holds the work constant, fixed units holds the units constant, and then fixed duration holds the duration constant. If you understand this concept and you keep this in your mind and you just keep hammering it down and thinking about it with every change you make in your schedule, the time you spend in your schedule will greatly decrease, especially if you spend a lot of time troubleshooting and trying to figure out why things are changing. when you do not expect them to. One thing I'll mention to you is at the conclusion of today's webinar, one of the last slides will have an email address. And if you send us an email and would like to receive a copy of these slides, we'd be happy to send that to you. And this one slide right here is worth its weight in gold for you, because it tells you if, depending on the type of task it is, what variable you change, what you can expect to be recalculated as a response to that. All right, so task types: fixed units, fixed duration, fixed work. We know how the scheduling formula works. We're going to see it live in action in just a few minutes. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we all share the same understanding of units. There are three different types of units, if you will. You have max units, which if you've been working with project, you're familiar with that. It just says, it defines how much of a resource's time is available for projects. So Sally might be working an 8-hour day here every day, 5 days a week, but she's going to spend at least 3 hours, 4 hours of her day working on maintenance, day-to-day, keep the lights on kind of things. So for project work, she's only available 50%. So I would say that she's available 50% of her calendar. So Sally's max units would be 50. By default, everyone's max units are set to 100, which means they're available 100% of their calendar. The next thing we're looking at is called assignment units. Assignment units is how much of a resource's time is initially assigned to a task. You can also think of it as anytime you go in and you manually adjust the resources percentage on a task, or when you initially assign a resource with a percentage to a task, that is the assignment units. Project will never recalculate assignment units. You can go in and do it, but project will not. Now, let me rephrase that. Project does recalculate it, it just doesn't make it visible. It's kind of hidden in the background. And that's where peak units comes into play. So if assignment units show us how a resource was initially assigned to a task, peak units shows us how much time a resource is currently assigned to a task. So Sally, initially I assigned Sally to a 3-day task, and I assigned her at 100%. Some things have changed. You know, I've had to make some changes to the work, to the duration, whatever the reason. Well, now Sally is actually working 50% on that task, but it still appears on the Gantt chart as though she's working 100%, because the assignment units is what you see on that Gantt chart, but the peak units is what is real. And I'll show you how to get to the peak units in just a few minutes. I know we're covering a lot of different things, and some of it, you know, may be a little bit confusing and a little bit jumbled, but hang in there with me. I want to give you the basics here, and then when we bring it all together in Microsoft Project, it'll be a lot clearer. Now, when we talk about max units, a couple of things that confuse people often. Let's say Kieran has 8-hour work days and his maximum units 100%. So Kieran is full-time available for projects. And then Jacques' calendar also says 8-hour work days, but like Sally that we talked about earlier, he's only spending half of his time on projects. So his max units would be set to 50%. Now that 50% looks at Jack's calendar, and it says Jacques has an 8-hour day calendar, so 50% of that is 4 hours a day. If Jacques' working calendar was 6 hours, then the 50% would be reflecting a 3-hour day. Wouldn't that be nice? And remember, the assignment units is how the resource was initially assigned, or if the project manager or whomever went in and manually changed the assignment. It will never be visibly, and I need to add that word, visibly recalculated by project here. It's going to happen in the background, but you're not going to see it on the Gantt chart. And then finally, the peak units, as we said, it is reflecting how the resource is currently assigned to that task right now. All right, let's jump into Microsoft Project. And let's do some live demos here of the things we just talked about. Before we go through changing these different tasks with their various task types, first let me make sure you're aware of where you can go to set the option overall for your task types. To do that, you're going to go to your options. So I'll come over to File, and then Options. And we'll find these options on the Schedule tab. Now on the Schedule tab, if I come down here, I can say Default Task Type, and right now my default task type is set to Fixed Work. So if you typically estimate work, you're estimating person hours, that's the most important thing to you, then you're going to use the Fixed Work task type. If you're typically estimating duration, the number of business days it takes, that's what's driving your work effort, then fixed duration would be your default task type. Fixed units should almost never be your default task type for all tasks. It may apply to certain tasks throughout the project. And also, that's another good point to mention. You are not married to any of these. So just because I leave it as fixed work here for this project, that just means that by default, my tasks will be set up as fixed work, but you can change them on a task-by-task basis. Another thing I'll point out to you here is where it says scheduling options for this project. And right now it's reflecting just this one project. But if I hit that drop down and set it to all new projects, now if I click OK, it's going to save that option, and every time I start a new project, it will apply that fixed work task type as I create tasks. Now the last thing I want to mention to you here is if you already have a schedule, if you're working with a schedule, there are tasks in it, and you decide, hey, wow, this makes sense. I really need to be using fixed duration, or I need to be using fixed work. If you come in here and you make this change to your default task type, it will not change anything that already exists in your schedule. It will only apply to new tasks. So if you want to go in and just, as a blanket, change all of your tasks to be fixed work or fixed duration, the quickest and easiest way to do that is first make sure you're seeing every single task. If you go over to the View tab and you highlight any column, on the outline icon, you can select all subtasks to make sure everything is visible. And then again, clicking on any column heading, all we're doing now is we're selecting every row in the schedule. So we're selecting every single task by clicking on a column heading. And then if you look on the task ribbon over towards the right, you see the information icon. This is going to allow me to make changes to multiple tasks at once. I am looking for the Advanced tab, and here where I see the task type, I can make my change. And you also have the option of adding effort driven. We'll talk about that effort driven in just a bit. So this will go in and change any existing task to the task type that you specify here. All right, so I have done a couple of things to get us ready for this demo. You can see I have 3 tasks created, and I just named them based on what task type they are. I have made sure to set the appropriate task type, so fixed duration, fixed work, and fixed units. And then I've also inserted the column called effort driven, so you can see that effort driven is turned on for all of these, and then we'll make some changes and with the effort driven, turn it off and show you how it impacts the schedule when effort driven is turned off. Let's start with task 1, our fixed duration task type. You can see that the task type is fixed duration. Effort driven is turned on. There is a 5-day duration, 40 hours of work, and Sally is assigned at 100%. Now, I know Sally's assigned at 100%. Again, if you've been working with project, if you don't see anything in brackets behind her name, you know that they're just full-time assigned. And then anything in brackets indicates that it's not their full-time assignment. But what you see here on the Gantt chart is not always, it's not always accurate. It's not always an accurate depiction of what is really happening with that resources assignments. For now, it is. Everything you see is exactly as it is. If you look down on the bottom half of the screen, I split my screen and I added the task usage view here at the bottom, because in the task usage view or in the assignment usage view, I can go in and I can see this column called peak. So let's do this real quick. I'm going to take us over to our task usage view. You have to insert the column called peak. So right click and insert, and then it's called peak. And this will show you for every task how your resource is actually assigned at any given moment. So all I'm doing here is I'm taking this task usage view and I'm splitting the screen so that I don't have to go back and forth between the screens as I demonstrate this for you. If you're not used to working with split screens, it's a fantastic feature in Microsoft Project. From the task ribbon, you can come over and select details, and that will automatically split your screen. There's a lot of information you can get here. If you right click, you can look at all kinds of things, and you're looking at the information for just one task at a time. I'm going to change the bottom half of the screen to task usage, and that'll just help us keep an eye on that peak units and how Sally is assigned to these various activities. All right, so for the fixed duration task, what I'm going to do here first, the duration is fixed, so our expectation is that 5 days of duration will not change. We are going to change the assignment units. Right now, Sally is assigned at 100%. I'm going to go over to my resource ribbon and click on Assign Resources. And I'm going to change work duration up here. Notice the duration changed to 20 hours. And you can see here in brackets that Sally is now assigned at 50%. I manually changed her units. That is the only reason you are seeing those units showing up here as 50% and not staying at the 100%, all right? So fixed duration task, we change the units and it recalculates the work. Now I'm gonna undo that. And on the fixed duration task, now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna add an additional resource. Now keep in mind, effort driven is turned on right now. So if I come back over here and I add Bob to that task, keep an eye on the duration in the work. So when I assign Bob, notice that both the duration and the work stay the same. Because the task is effort driven, it's saying that as you add and remove resources, the amount of work cannot be recalculated. So it's kind of like it's prioritizing your variables there, and it's making the work the second most important. So if you adjust the resources, it's not going to recalculate the work. But look at Sally and Bob. They don't have brackets, right? So that would lead you to believe they're assigned at 100% to this task. But if both of them were assigned at 100%, it would be 80 hours instead of 40. Glance down at the bottom of the screen at our peak units. For this task name called fixed duration, Sally is currently assigned at 50% and Bob is currently assigned at 50%. But that is not reflected in the Gantt chart. And that's what I meant when I said earlier that project will recalculate it, but it doesn't make it visible. So it's happening in the background. Now we're going to undo that again. And this time I'm going to turn effort driven off. So if effort driven is turned off, and then I do the same thing and add Bob, watch the work column. Notice the work now is recalculated to be 80 hours. So if it's not effort driven, that means the work can change. The work and the effort, that's the same thing. So it will allow changes to be made to the work. All right, we're going to go ahead and undo that again because I may come back to that in a bit as well. So that is your fixed duration task type with effort driven turned on and off. Now, with that fixed duration task type, another thing that we can look at is adjusting the hours. So if I come up here and I say the work hours are going to be 20 instead of 40, it doesn't change up here on the Gantt chart. It doesn't change the duration, but it actually did change her assignment because you can see now that her assignment is at 50%. It is no longer at 100%. All right, let's go down to the fixed work task type. So if the task type is set to fixed work, let's change the duration to 2 days and see what happens. We change it to 2 days. I did that on the wrong one, didn't I? I'm going to come up here and change it on the fixed work task for real this time. If I change it to 2 days, notice the work is not recalculated. But look at Sally's assignment units. If you look down at the bottom, Sally's assigned at 250%. This is why it's a good idea to keep a close eye on that peak units column, because again, over here, you don't see anything that would indicate there's a problem. But if you do look over on the left, you have the indicator. Anytime you see this little red person image icon over here on the left, that means you have at least one resource on that task who is over allocated. Right, and I'll undo that. Now let's see what happens on this fixed work task type if I were to go in and add Bob. So if I come up here to assign resources and I add Bob, it reduces the duration because again, we're saying this is a fixed work task. It's 40 hours of work no matter what. If we add another person, we can get it done a little bit faster, which is often a good thing. All right, let's look at fixed units. Now, for fixed units, we have 5-day duration and work is set to 40 hours. Remember that fixed units means it does not want to change the way the resource is assigned. So if I change the duration to 2 days, it's going to recalculate the hours. And you'll notice down here in the peak units area, you can see that Sally is still assigned at 100%. Now, if I go in and manually change Sally to be 50% on this task, what would you expect to happen? Pay attention to the effort-driven column and note that effort-driven is turned on. So if I change Sally to 50%, it recalculates the duration to 10 days. And you can see that it's updated here on the Gantt. And remember, the reason you're able to see that is because we manually made that change. Microsoft Project did not make that change as a result of something else that we did. We went in, we entered that, and that's the only reason why you're seeing it there on the Gantt chart. So, in review, you have fixed duration, which is going to hold your duration constant. You have fixed work, which will hold your work constant. And you have fixed units, which will hold your units constant. Keep in mind that the effort driven, if that is turned on, all it means is that as you start adding resources to your tasks, it's going to hold the work constant. It's going to mean that the work is that the task is effort driven, meaning that that number of work hours is what you really anticipate it will take, and adding more resources will just shorten the amount of time required to complete the task. Also remember the difference between max units is the percentage of a resource's calendar that's available for project work. Assignment units is how the resource is assigned to the task at that current time. And then you also have peak units. Assignment units is how it was originally assigned. Peak units is how it is currently assigned at this point in time in the schedule. That wraps up everything that I wanted to show you with regard to the task types and helping to understand why things may be changing in your schedule. I do want to take a couple of minutes and inform you of a few things coming up. We've got some more webinars, the next one on November 1st with project status reports, creating project online workflows using SharePoint Designer on the 15th of November, working with Power BI on the 6th of December, and then InfoPath integration with Project Online on December 20th. You are able to earn PDU credits for that, and you can go to ppmworks.com/events to register and view the full list of all the events that we are offering. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. First of all, I want you to make sure you check out our blog, look at the rest of our webinar schedule, see if there's anything else you'd like to attend. Send any questions you have to info@ppmworks.com. And then we also have, in addition to the webinars, we have a fantastic blog that has a ton of great information. If you send us a note, let us know you want these slides, we'll send them over to you, and you'll have the links included in the slides. There's a blog post that talks about optimizing your schedule and following some best practices to minimize the amount of time you spend in the schedule, but maximize the benefit that you get out of it. And then finally, once you've got your project all up to speed, you're ready to go with it, we have another post that'll talk with you about setting your baseline and understanding how to manage multiple baselines. Also, please reach out and connect with us on LinkedIn. You can find me linkedin.com in Garing Cindy, and then also you can connect with us at LinkedIn company PPM Works -Inc.